I'm Charlie Group on the Kasey Ferguson Show, joined today by Trevor Tuminski of the band Omens, Jet Set Satellite, singer, songwriter, sometimes guitar player. Today we're going to talk about some things from the old, some things of the new, and some things fun like Halloween. Trevor, for our listeners who may be hearing your voice for the first time, talk about when you were younger. When did you start singing? And when you started singing, did you have a vocal coach? When I was younger, I was in a choir. Obviously, you can tell by my awesome skill now. You hear my awesome deep voice. I had a vocal coach. I was an alto. And then puberty came. I had thrived as a bass. Then I let it go. Did you have any kind of vocal training?
Not early on, no, and I'm just getting over a cold now, which is very much still congestion in my throat if you can hear it. But I was very late into singing. I my first couple bands, my teenage bands, I just played guitar. I started playing guitar probably when I was about 13 or 14, which again is even a little bit late for a lot of people to get into it. And it wasn't until I was probably 18 or 19 playing in bands where, there was just, it was hard to find a good singer. It's hard to find that sort of character voice that you're looking for. And my first band was a band called, my first serious band. I mean, I had some other bands, but my first serious band that actually played out around Winnipeg, our hometown, was called Far Gone. And we had a lead singer, but I sang a couple of songs on the first album that we put out. And so I was just kind of a secondary singer more than anything, just almost a bit of a novelty, that I played a couple songs. And then it became, I think, three or four songs on the second album that we put out. And by the time we were working on our third album, it was almost 50-50. Got a good response. My voice was getting stronger. I was getting a little more comfortable in finding my voice. I didn't have a vocal coach at that time, and I haven't actually ever had a vocal teacher until recently. I've taken some classes here and there, and I've done some studying online and books and stuff like that. Really, this new band Omens that I'm singing with now, the material, and I just think just getting a little long in the tooth, needed me to kind of brush up on vocal training and stuff. And so I reached out to an old friend who had become a vocal coach, and he really helped me kind of get my voice back up to speed and up to the next level, really, in order to be able to do the stuff that's on the new album by Omens. Honestly, it was probably the biggest impact on my voice as a singer happened when I started working with my main songwriting partner in Jet Set Satellite, Dave Swizicki, who's also known as Bulldog a lot of the time. That was when all of a sudden there was a piano player in the band, and he would often have these songs that he was working on that had string arrangements and more, the sort of slower ballady kind of stuff. And suddenly the straight ahead raspy kind of approach wasn't going to work, and I had to smooth my voice out and really sing. And it challenged me in that way, and so my voice kind of started to develop more on that level, and that fed back into the raspy stuff too eventually, but my voice started to get a lot stronger and develop a lot more character. But it's, I mean, to this day, man, it's a work in progress. Like I feel like I do have a voice of my own, for sure, but it's a challenging instrument to play. Like, especially when we start hitting the road and stuff like that, and you've got to be on your best behavior because your body is your instrument. And I remember being on that first tour and that sinking in and realizing, wow, I probably should have spent a lot more time practicing guitar because being the singer in a touring band is very hard.
Yeah, multi skills definitely more attractive to not just yourself, but in the event that bands dissolve or you decide that you make a hard choice and you want to move on yourself,
Yeah.
it's more appealing to have those multi skills that you can do. When did you figure out that you had that ability to songwrite? Because not everybody has that ability, especially being able to write not just lyrics, but music as well.
I mean, writing is something that I've always had an interest in, and I guess it was an area that like I showed an aptitude for, I think from an earlier age. I was writing short stories and things like that. So lyric writing was maybe like, kind of a natural extension from that. I think that too, though, like took a lot of practice. I think my lyric writing has gotten a lot better even towards the last Jet Set album. I think it was getting there. There was a time after the band when I spent a large part of my career getting back into the workforce after trading in kind of the music life as a career, and I was working at a magazine called Rue Morgue, and which I think we're probably going to get back to in this interview. But that really advanced my writing, and it's kind of one of those things that I've found that when you're a naturally creative person, everything you do kind of goes into everything that you're going to do. And so, Rue Morgue and my time working as a journalist there really helped my lyric writing, I think, and my editing ability, my self-editing ability, to just be like, that line can be stronger, or, it doesn't have enough of a gut punch to it, doesn't have enough of attention to it, isn't relatable enough, doesn't quite communicate what it is that I want to communicate. So I do feel like my lyric writing is just, again, another work in progress, but, has advanced a lot from other types of writing that I've done. In terms of songwriting, I think, like, again, I was probably in junior high when I just started to try and write songs. I listened to radio from when I was a kid. My dad would always be listening to FM radio. And, I just gravitated towards songs on the radio that kind of had like that a bit of dark and mysteriousness to it, like bands like the Police and the Eurythmics, and even stuff like Abracadabra by the Steve Miller Band, and stuff that just had that synthy kind of sound. For me, I guess it's no mistake then that Jet Set ended up being kind of a mix of like heavier guitars and keyboards, because those were kinds of some of the bands that I listened to. Like, I later on, when I was a bit older, it was like the Faith No More's kind of the world. There was always bands with keyboards in them, Deep Purple. So that kind of influence came about in Jet Set too. But in terms of songwriting, I guess it was just something that, I mean, I agree. There's great players who can't really write songs, and there's people like me that can write songs but aren't really great players. Like, I play instruments, I play the keys, and I play guitar, but they're more like songwriting tools for me. Like, I can't play Eruption by Eddie Van Halen, but I can write a song and arrange it. So I guess we just all have different skills. They're kind of different aptitudes in a way. And that's one of mine.
I gotta ask you because I'm curious. Do you still have the pink bunny hat from Baby Cool Your Jets?
No, I have the shoes that I wore, which were very unusual, but I never possessed the pink bunny hat. I'm not even sure where that ended up. I suspect it was probably the director. That was his nod to the movie Gummo, which was kind of like a B movie almost, at the time, like an art house kind of movie that was around. And there was the character was wearing the pink bunny ears, and he wanted to put a nod to that in the Cool Your Jets video.
I saw that being in one of your clients' commercials somewhere. Just, somewhere along the lines of something you would have written. You just could have phased that in there because
Yeah.
my trade is I'm a radio producer. I did commercials for many years. And the creativity you have when you have a team around you, like I remember many days sitting in the boardroom, and it's not just you're the one that does all the work. You got your copy guy, you got your sales guys. Sometimes you're just sitting there shooting ideas out there, and you come up with it and you put the best product out there. And the writers have so much of an input. I remember, I forget his name, I think it was Dave, and he was one of the smartest guys we had out there. And I always know I could go out to him and say, Dave, what do you think? And he'd come back with 10 ideas.
Mhm.
And like, what are you asking him for? He's the writer. I'm like, because he's one of the smartest guys. He's got one of the best visions.
Yeah.
That's why you ask them, because they're the ones putting pen to paper. They're going to see it from their mind first.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, that's the nature of collaboration too, right? Like, there really has to be, you have to be confident in what you bring to the table enough to completely let it go and let it be somebody else's idea, but be comfortable in recognizing the great idea that didn't come from you, someone else, and trying to build upon it or whatever, right? Like, I think, being in a band is the group project from hell. You have to be really collaborative, and ego often plays a part in people that aren't comfortable enough in what they bring to the table. And, one of the things that we really like about where we're at right now, myself and Mike Keller, who's the guitar player from Jet Set, but he's also in Omens. Him and I kind of formed the band, and our drummer, Don Jacks, we're completely ego free. It's like no asshole policy. We're all here for the same reason, and we're all just comfortable in contributing what it is that we contribute. It doesn't matter, this guy wrote 75% of this song, the next song he may have only written 20% of, and maybe he didn't have anything else. It didn't have anything at all to do with the third song. Whatever, we split everything evenly, because it's very hard to measure someone's contribution. Would you have had that idea if the drummer didn't play that fill? Would you, I don't want to get out the measuring stick in terms of what people contribute. And to me, that is the very nature of like really, really healthy collaboration, is just like being in the room, being supportive of everyone's ideas, and no dumb ideas, just like no judgment, just kind of let your brains fly and see what happens and latch on to the best thing and just try and work together and make it the best that it can be.
I gotta think that's gotta be the hardest thing to write is a drummer piece. When you sit there behind one, like I've never been a drummer, but I've sat behind a professional drummer set just to sit and look at it. And it's like, nope,
Yeah.
That's not me. And
Well,
then you
yeah,
sit, you gotta, how do you figure that out?
me neither. I'm completely uncoordinated in that way, and I don't even have an easy time kind of explaining, drum hits or what I'm hearing in my head to a drummer. Mike in our band is much better at that, and can kind of articulate to Don what he might be hearing if Don's not, playing something that Mike figures is the best thing for the riff or what have you. But Don, then comes back with like something incredible. So that's just a different aptitude too, right? It's like everybody's brains work differently, and we just have to find that part where synchronicity happens, and we're all just, there is those magic moments where, some of the best songs, I mean, you've probably heard this before, but some of the best songs come together in no time at all. Like some of them, like I think of like Best Way to Die and Cool Your Jets. Those came together in like under half an hour. And there's a couple of songs on the Omens record that are the same thing. I've spent I've spent over a year working on certain songs, and I've written songs in 20 minutes. And it's often the ones that come together so quickly that are the ones that have lasting staying power for whatever reason.
Now I gotta ask you, I can jump ahead of myself here, but it kind of ties in on that. You wrote so many great songs on that Omens record, and I love Black Magic. Fell in love with it the moment I heard it. But there's so many other great songs. How do you choose the first single? Because there's so many good choices.
I mean, that one was kind of part of the discussion. I mean, the way the Omens record came together was basically we did something that we didn't do with Jet Set Satellite, which was we were a little bit more intentional and planful with what we were doing. Mike and I got together without instruments and just said, hey, if we were going to start a new band, what would we be going for? What influences of ours would we tap into? What would be kind of the outcome that we were actually desiring? Because with Jet Set Satellite, we often, we had a few writers in the band. There was at times 3 or 4 writers amongst the 5 of us, I would say, and everybody contributed. But I mean, there was like actively 3 or 4 writers who would bring almost like full song pieces to the band, and we were chasing good songs. And so sometimes we didn't really think about whether the song was right for the band or played into the greater sound that we wanted to put out there or even the album, but it was just like, hey, this is a great song. Is it right for what we're trying to put out? Does it fit into our sound? I don't know. So, I've always had this feeling about Jet Set that, especially with the first couple of albums, that they felt really schizophrenic. A couple people have in our past, producers and mixers and stuff have compared us to the Smashing Pumpkins, and that we had these heavier songs, but then we had these like ballads too, right? Like these quite ballads. With Omens, we wanted to do something that was a bit more cohesive, a little bit harder. Part of that is us detuning all the way to C for most of the songs. And Mike and I just got together, once every 2 weeks. We got together every second Tuesday for about 3, 4 hours. And we just worked on the riffs that we had. He had riffs, I had riffs. We started to figure out which riffs went together. Eventually, you just start building momentum. Big parts of songs would come together. We were spending our time apart, continuing to further along those ideas. And we were recording all of our sessions on a laptop, on a phone or whatever, just so we could listen back, start to try and piece those things together. And Black Magic was one of the ones that came out like very early on. It was probably one of the first 3 or 4 songs for the album. And we just thought this has radio potential. We didn't go out of our way to craft it any which way. We promised ourselves that we were going to, not carve things too close to the bone. We weren't going to think about getting on radio necessarily. We were going to let the songs breathe. We were going to have long solos. We were going to, have just bigger rock and roll moments, I guess, in it. We wanted to inspire air guitar and, that kind of stuff. But yeah, that was one that kind of just stood out a little bit as having some, just a bit more accessible, perhaps.
Oh, absolutely. Song is absolutely amazing. I heard it the first time and I was like, wow. And then when the video came out, I couldn't stop watching it. That's where I went next was the tarot cards, the Ouija boards. I'm like, wow. All it did was just bring me back to our Halloween theme that we were going with is like Ouija boards, tarot cards. All I'm thinking is it brings up the Ouija movies, Origin of Evil, the Ouija, or even the new tarot movie. Do you do the supernatural horror movies at all, or do you just like regular monster movies?
Oh no, I mean like I really like the classics, like certainly The Exorcist, The Omen, But I like sci-fi horror too. Like I love Sunshine and The Thing, like classic stuff like Rosemary's Baby. Like I'm kind of all over the map with horror. Like I mean, I really like some of newer stuff too, like Hereditary. I'm always up for a good horror flick.
Yeah, I was gonna go because my favorite Jet Set song of all time gotta be Lady Killer. There's no question about it. Probably best song of all time. And the video, right in line with that again. Zombie, vampire, take your pick, whatever people call them. So
Yeah.
again, John Carpenter's Vampire is my favorite movie, or
Nice.
Night of the Living Dead. Can't beat
Yeah. Yeah.
them. So do you go for vampires?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, like, you name it. I mean, like Fright Night was a huge one for me, growing up. Certainly John Carpenter, all of his movies, like huge John Carpenter fan.
Perfect. Do you ever get into like Scream or those kind of movies?
I haven't seen that one, but my birthday's actually on Halloween too, so like Halloween
Oh,
close to my heart. Like, yeah, my parents were amazing about kind of fostering that from when I was a kid. All my birthday cakes were always like jack-o'-lanterns and owls and ghosts and all that stuff, like right from the time that I turned one, basically, and always had Halloween costumes. In fact, like I have only like one family portrait in my house, really, like of my sister and my parents, and it's like it's on my desk and it's right here. And this was like from the last Jet Set show that we played, other than a reunion show that we played, but that's me as like the Count from Hilarious House of Frightenstein. And then
amazing.
my mom was just like as a witch. My sister's kind of Little Dead Riding Hood, and my dad came as Indiana Jones. But that was a Halloween show that we played for. We used to call them the Jet Set Satellite Halloween Haunt, and so we'd all perform in costume. And my parents and my family came out for that, so it's pretty cool.
That is absolutely amazing. It's a fantastic memory for
Yeah,
sure. That I don't I'm speechless. That's absolutely amazing.
yeah, no,
To have
like
something like that. I want to go back and ask you about careers. So we did mention, or you did mention about, because obviously the band did disband for a little while, and you did go back to school. How did you find that transition out of being on stage and being in music?
it was rocky. I'll be honest. I spent about 10 years backing up a little bit. Jet Set Satellite grew out of a project that I was doing for a college course originally. So I was en route to becoming a copywriter. I was working at a radio station writing radio ads. I always loved radio since I was a kid, and it always felt like a natural place for me. Like you, as soon as I didn't get it started as early as high school, but as soon as I was in college and university, I had a radio show, and I worked as a music director. And then when I got hired, I got a summer job in the second year of the course, and I was writing radio ads. And it was around then that my term project turned into a record deal, and Jet Set Satellite was born. And so I kind of left that part of my career behind, and for the next 10 years pursued Jet Set Satellite and worked at my friend's record store in between touring and whenever, band activity and stuff like that. And when I kind of just had decided that it was a good point in my life where I should probably focus on something else just for the future to make sure that I had something to fall back on, I really didn't have anything on my resume to show. My schooling was a bit old, wasn't very current. I didn't know where to start. And I ended up moving to Toronto, which was not something that I would have expected. But my girlfriend at the time got a job in Toronto, and so I followed her there. I didn't know anybody. I didn't really have any leads. And one of my interests after a couple of odd jobs that didn't really pan out was to get some work in film and television. And there's a pretty big industry there. And I got basically a job, in the lowest rung that you can get, which is just like film security, watching trucks, watching equipment. One of my first gigs was on a horror movie called Orphan. They hired me to watch a hole in the ground. They had a camera position at the bottom of a slide in a playground, and they had to leave it overnight. And so there's this great big hole, and they didn't want any kids falling in it. And so they literally had me watching a hole for like 12 hours overnight to make sure nobody fell in the hole. And coming from a place where you'd been on stage and played in front of 10,000 people, 30,000 people before in your career and been on Much Music and all that stuff, getting not much more than minimum wage to watch a hole in the ground was, humbling. But I almost accepted it as kind of a penance, I think. I'm probably no different than most self-flagellating creatives, having imposter syndrome and all of those things. And I think the luxury of being able to focus on music for a decade while my friends, bought their first houses, had families, started families, had cars, worked on their careers and stuff. I felt like I had a pound of flesh to kind of give up for that. And starting at the bottom, watching a whole, working kind of a no-brain security job kind of felt like almost like I had it coming or something. Yeah, like you can't really explain it, right? It's just like the way you feel at that time. And so I felt like, okay, if this is where I have to start, like this is where I have to start. And I'm going to show people that I'm worth more than watching a hole. But I'm going to do whatever they ask of me and just going to try and do it to the best of my abilities. And so I really started from scratch. And over the next couple of years, just tried to prove myself, move myself up in that industry. And I did. And I got to work on some pretty big TV shows. And I met my wife, which is the best thing that happened out of that. And then, when I was kind of at the end of my rope, just in terms of physical exhaustion, because that life is very hard. And after a couple of years of it, I was already burning out. A magazine that I was kind of freelancing for, just doing some music reviews here and there, some small features and sidebars and stuff, rang up and said, hey, we have a junior editor position open and heard that, you might want to consider a career move and we'd love for you to come and interview for that. And it was Room Org magazine.
That's pretty awesome. It's pretty humbling, I guess. Like you said, when things go that way, you go from on stage to watching a hole. Just life can take a turn like that sometimes, but makes us better people sometimes when you got to go that way.
It does,
But
and I think it does, and I think it's important for people to know that, like, like your career can have zigs and zags. It's not a straight line. You get up, you can be up, up, up. Like, I mean, I think I even learned that from just being in the band. I mean, being in a Canadian band is like one night, you'd play in a bigger center like Toronto or Quebec City or something, and they'd have you in a 5-star hotel and maybe even pick you up from the hotel in a limousine. And then the next night you were playing in North Bay and you're staying in the band house, which was somewhere, it's kind of sleep on top of the sheets kind of place. Like we're literally flipping a coin to find out like who gets to sleep on the pool table because it looks like the cleanest surface in the building. So, you kind of just take the ups as you can and try and stay kind of balanced no matter what happens. So we never got too big for ourselves and we never got too down either. So I guess in a way I was almost prepared for it, but you just hope that you can kind of work your way out of it and do the mental work too to kind of like keep yourself afloat in a way and just like keep the dream alive.
nothing is given, it's always earned for sure. Well, Trevor, I want to ask you one last question. It's something that actually, believe it or not, it's a question that I modified from when I was in high school. I was asking baseball players this question.
Okay.
So I'll take a stab at it and see how it goes. If you could ask one question to one band or singer from any time period, past or present, who would that person or band be and why?
Wow. That's a really hard question. There's so many. I mean, singing itself is a mystery, right? Like I don't have a lot of formal training, so it's like I'm always, whenever I meet a singer, I'm always full of questions. But I guess, wow, that's a really tough question.
That's why I save it for last.
Yeah, I mean, probably, and I just saw them recently for the first time, which is kind of remarkable just because I've been listening to them for so long. I saw Pantera play, and I never saw them back in the heyday with the brothers, Vinnie Paul and Dimebag Darrell. But Phil Anselmo is a singer who, kind of started off more in that Judas Priest range, doing high stuff on the first album, Cowboys from Hell, like more like Rob Halford style, and then kind of went more into like barking kind of territory. But certainly the song Fucking Hostile was like a song off Vulgar Display of Power that really inspired me as a singer. I was, one of my friends that could actually kind of emulate that. And that might have been one of the first keys that I could, get into, access that kind of raspier part of my voice. But the length at which he does that in a night, in a set, on an album, I would love to speak to him and be like, how the heck do you do that? How do you manage the wear and tear on your voice like that? And how have you done it after all these years? Because yeah, I saw them just earlier this year, and I mean, he's got to be in his 50s now, and sounded pretty great.
There's a lot of guys that have that question for like about how they do it to their voice, and I don't know how they do it, and I'd love to know how they do it. I know I asked Lee Downer that question the other day, how he does it to his voice, and he's like, I just do it from my stomach. I'm like, well, that
Yeah,
tells me a lot.
yeah,
Okay, you still got a voice, but
yeah, yeah.
all
So,
right.
so